Her engagement had been the talk of the entire city. Invitations were already printed, decorations had been ordered, and her parents had spared no expense in arranging what they believed would be the most glamorous wedding of the year. Elena was set to marry Richard, the son of a powerful business tycoon, and for months her life had been filled with fittings, rehearsals, and endless parties celebrating their supposed perfect union. But behind the polished smiles and dazzling jewelry, Elena's heart was restless. Richard was charming on the surface, but she had seen glimpses of his true nature, his arrogance, his cold indifference to people he considered beneath him, and his careless words that often cut her down in private. She kept convincing herself that love was not always necessary in arranged marriages, that companionship and wealth could fill the void. Yet on the eve of her wedding, the truth crashed down. Richard called off the engagement in front of her, sneering that he had found someone better suited for his lifestyle. Her world collapsed. Her family was humiliated. Her friends whispered behind her back, and Elena locked herself in her room for days, refusing to face the pitying eyes of society. The pain was unbearable, but so was the shame. She wanted to disappear, to escape the cage of expectations that had chained her for years. It was on one of those stormy nights that she met Daniel. She had stormed out of her house in tears, wandering the quiet streets in her satin gown, as if walking away from her shattered dreams. The rain poured, and she took shelter under a small roadside cafe, the kind of place she had never noticed before. Inside, she found him an unassuming man, wiping tables with quiet dedication. His clothes were simple, his hands calloused, and yet his eyes held a depth she had never seen in Richard's or anyone else's. He noticed her soaked dress and offered her a warm cup of tea without asking for payment. "You look like you've lost something," he said gently. She wanted to laugh at the understatement, but instead, she told him everything. Perhaps it was the storm. Perhaps it was his silence that felt safe. But she poured her heart out, and he simply listened, never interrupting, never judging. The next day, she found herself returning to that cafe, and then again, and again. His name was Daniel. He worked long hours, living in a modest apartment above the cafe, and though he had little, he seemed content. Elena was drawn to his simplicity, the way he found joy in the smallest things, like the aroma of freshly brewed coffee, or the laughter of children who came to buy pastries. He was poor, undeniably, yet he carried himself with quiet dignity. Their friendship deepened, and within weeks, something reckless sparked inside her. One evening, still reeling from the betrayal of her broken engagement, she asked him a question that surprised even herself. "Would you marry me?" Daniel stared at her, stunned. "You don't mean that." "I do," she whispered. "I need to start over. And I trust you." He hesitated, but eventually, he agreed. Their wedding was nothing more than a quiet ceremony at the courthouse. No flowers, no guests, no diamonds, just a promise spoken in hushed voices. Her parents were horrified when they learned, disowning her for throwing away what they called her one chance at a bright future. Elena didn't care. For the first time, she felt free. Life with Daniel was not easy. The tiny apartment was cramped, and she traded silk gowns for second-hand dresses. There were days when money was scarce, when they had to share a single meal, and when she questioned if she had made the right choice. Yet, in the middle of those struggles, she discovered something she had never known before: genuine love. Daniel adored her. He would walk miles to find her favorite flowers, stay up late fixing her broken shoes, and whisper words of encouragement when she doubted herself. His laughter filled their small home with warmth, and his steady presence became her anchor. She realized that the happiness she had once sought in wealth and luxury paled in comparison to the peace she felt by his side. Months passed, and Elena learned to live simply. She worked alongside him at the cafe, discovering a joy in serving people that she never thought possible. Customers adored her, often commenting on how radiant she looked despite her modest life. She was glowing, and Daniel noticed too. But beneath his humble exterior, Daniel carried a secret. Late at night, when Elena had drifted to sleep, he would check his phone, responding to messages filled with business codes and financial reports. He wasn't merely a poor man. In truth, Daniel was the heir to a vast fortune, a successful entrepreneur who had chosen to step away from the ruthless corporate world to live a life of anonymity. He wanted to find someone who loved him, not his wealth. And Elena had done exactly that. She had chosen him when she thought he had nothing, when her own life was at its lowest. That's why he stayed silent, wanting to see how deep her love truly went. One fateful evening, everything changed. A wealthy businessman walked into the cafe and froze when he saw Daniel. "Sir, what are you doing here?" the man exclaimed loudly. Elena looked at Daniel in shock, hearing words she couldn't comprehend. "Sir," Daniel tried to brush it off, but the man continued, revealing snippets about Daniel's empire, his companies, his hidden fortune. The cafe grew quiet, all eyes on him. Later that night, Elena confronted him, her voice trembling. "Is it true? You're not poor? You're a millionaire?" Daniel sighed, taking her hands. "Yes, Elena, I am. But I didn't tell you because I needed to. No, if you loved me for me, not for my money. I've been betrayed before, and I couldn't risk it again." Tears welled in her eyes, but they weren't of anger, they were of relief. Because now she understood why he had always seemed so composed, so certain, despite his supposed struggles. She threw her arms around him, whispering, "I would have loved you if you had nothing at all." Their lives transformed overnight. Daniel finally revealed his identity to the world, and suddenly Elena found herself not in a tiny apartment, but in a sprawling mansion. Yet, what touched her most was that Daniel still kept the cafe running, not because he needed the money, but because it reminded him of where their love story began. In time, Elena's parents came to visit, ashamed of how they had cast her aside. They were stunned by her new life, but Elena didn't flaunt her wealth. Instead, she told them gently, "I didn't marry him for this. I married him because he made me happy when I had nothing." Her words silenced them, teaching them a lesson they would never forget. Years later, as Elena stood in the cafe with Daniel by her side, watching the sunset through the glass windows, she realized something profound. Her broken engagement had once felt like the end of the world, but in truth, it had been the doorway to the greatest love of her life. What she thought was a disaster was actually destiny leading her not to riches, but to a man whose heart was worth more than all the diamonds in the world. She smiled at Daniel, and he smiled back, his hand slipping into hers. "Still think I'm just a poor man?" he teased softly. She laughed, shaking her head. "No, you're the richest man I know, not because of your money, but because of your heart." And in that moment, surrounded by the aroma of coffee and the warmth of love, Elena knew that her story was not one of loss, but of unexpected, extraordinary fate.